everybody to Facebook Live. Right now joining us in on the Lure Studios page, and this is my friend Ted Corbeil, and we're about to do a live broadcast on Market Like a Pro Radio, which is a Lure Studios podcast, and we got an exciting episode ahead for you, so stay tuned. Alright, cool. Alright everybody, thanks and welcome once again to Market Like a Pro Radio, brought to you by Lure Studios. I am really excited today to have my friend Ted Corbeil Jr. here. Is that how you want me to say Jr.? I don't know, you put that on your other stuff. But.
Yeah, you can leave it off.
Awesome. Leave it off?
You can say it the first time.
Okay, awesome. Okay, good.
So distinguish me from my father.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Ted is an amazing man. I had the privilege of meeting him, about, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5 months ago, something like that. And through what we do, and once we got started talking, I knew I was in just the company of a brother right here. So Ted has a remarkable background. He he was a Marine strategist for a long time, and we'll get way into that here during the podcast. But he's since gone on, since his incredible career with the Marines and in strategy and doing a lot of cool stuff to go on and work more in the corporate realm. In helping sales and marketing and getting into that from a strategy perspective, and he's done some incredible things. So I'm going to read real quick through a list of stuff that he's done, and then I'll let him introduce himself the rest of the way. But so he's led 100 intelligence analysts during a production of 1,000 analytic products to drive counterinsurgency operations in southwest Afghanistan. He's increased sales from 300,000 to 1.1 million in 12 months from an integration. Let's see, we'll go into that for an integration firm. Raised $15,000 in 30 days using GoFundMe for a group of middle school students to go to a competition. And this one's extremely impressive, but he created an innovative analysis-driven sales enablement program to drive new client revenue growth for a Fortune 50 IT services company, created $10 million in the pipeline in the first 6 months. That's impressive, man. I got to tell you. Thanks for being on today. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah. Well, so those were just a few of the just minor scratch of the surface things that I know about you. Why don't you go ahead and do a real quick introduction, just let people know a little bit more about you, and then we'll get started.
Sure. No, sounds good. Like Cory mentioned, I'm a recently retired Marine Corps intelligence officer. So I retired just over 2 years ago. Well, unofficially less than 2 years ago. August will be 2 years. But I separated on permanent vacation in April, and I started my first real job in June of 2015. So that was with a woman-owned small business systems integration firm, where I did technical sales in industrial automation for 12 months before being recruited by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise to move down here to Plano and create a sales enablement program. And subsequently now we were spun off as of April to form a new startup, DXE Technology, so we are now the largest global IT services company.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, so every time I talk to you, you're into some interesting thing that's been going on, and a lot of it, I love your brain, man. I mean, we talked about this before over dinner, and, we're drinking some stuff and just kind of talking about how a lot of what you did while you were in Afghanistan, and the way I understand it is that you would get the command from an upper level, like a general or something, typically, or how did that, some kind of a higher level officer, and then between that person and the boots on the ground, there had to be a plan put together, and you were that guy, right?
Yeah, essentially my role as an intelligence officer is to aid decision making. So we supported the commander or the senior leadership. They would come up with their plans of what they want to accomplish, and then we would support the strategic planning and then provide the information requirements necessary to execute on those plans.
Yeah. So what I really want to dive into today is how do we take that mindset, right? And I'm not even coming close to thinking that we're going to be able to develop the mind of Ted Corbeil in a 30-minute podcast, but how do we really dive in and start to understand what it takes to have that kind of a way of thinking? Because I think from a marketing perspective, we have to be viewing every aspect from that, really in all of our life, but specifically in marketing, because that's what we're talking about today. How do we start to implement or even take on that mindset of a Marine intelligence, person, of how each thing is going to work for us, and then how to measure that, and then implement the teams around that? So it's a broad question, but kind of what are some of the first steps along the path of that?
Yeah, It's interesting because, like I said, for the past 2 years, I've been figuring out as I transitioned from the military into the civilian world and starting a second career, which is essentially a career change, right? So people out there who haven't served in the military, it's the equivalent of changing careers, right? After 20 years in one industry, switching to a completely different new career industry, except for the fact that you speak a foreign language that no one understands. So some additional, essentially a little bit extra complications. But I figured out how to kind of apply my structured approach to problem solving and mission analysis, and just a simple focus on. Yeah. So in the Marine Corps, we focus on the 2 tenets of Marine Corps leadership: our mission accomplishment and troop welfare. So we're always laser focused first on mission accomplishment, which in the business world is accomplishing your business. What the mission is, and then you backwards plan from your desired end state. So you just a simple focus on all that, on the stuff that really matters, and not going down too many rabbit holes or focusing on a bunch of stuff and making things complicated. Just looking at things, boiling it down to its essence, and coming up with a simple plan, and then executing it well.
Well, you make that sound so easy and effortless a little bit. Well, I think there's a lot more to it, in the end. But I mean all the genius that resides in you, and then all the training, it's kind of, it comes down to that. But you couldn't put it more clearly, for sure.
That's the beauty of it. Marine Corps is renowned for its success on the battlefield, but what it comes down to is brilliance in the basics. So that was instilled at me from a young age when I first entered the Marine Corps out of high school, is being the best in the very basics of it. So you don't have to get overly complicated. It's brilliance in the basics. So you focus on what matters, you come up with a simple plan, and then you just execute it violently, and you accomplish your goal at all costs. So if you run into obstacles, you brainstorm ways around it, go around, over, under, through it, and then you focus on results. Result focused is what matters.
Yeah, so whenever you're putting together something like that, how do you gauge your results? What are some of the indicators that you're typically looking for?
Yeah, well, that's a big part of the mission analysis problem framing. The first step is, what does success look like?
Yeah.
What are the metrics by which you want to accomplish it? Because that's what matters, right? If you're going to play football, score matters. If you're going to sail, sales matter. If you're, It depends on your objectives. And even from a marketing perspective, what is your desired intent? What are you trying to accomplish? That determines your messaging, the clients you're going, the audience you're going after. You got to focus on the metrics that matter, and you start up front. You can't win unless you know the rules of the game and how you win, and how you're going to keep score. So metrics is a big part of mission planning and problem solving training.
That's huge. So what questions do you begin to ask then in that regard? So say we were trying to pull something together right now, what actionable questions could we start asking ourselves right now to kind of pull that together for some of these people that may not be as familiar with the concept of creating these metrics, right? Because there's been times in my own life, but just in general, where people tend to more be by the just go with the flow, or just go and do something, especially in the entrepreneurial world, which a lot of our listeners are definitely going to relate with, and they might see results, they might not, and very rarely is it because it was meant to happen.
Sure. Performance evaluation is a big part of goal accomplishment, right?
Yeah.
You got to know what you're trying to accomplish. So you set out what your goals are. So if you're an entrepreneur, you want to have aspirations to create your own company, but that's not specific enough.
Yeah.
That's not accomplishing. That's not really a goal. It's got to be more concrete than that. So for you, digital marketing. You want to be the best in digital marketing. You want to specialize in social media and automation tools to automate some of that prospecting, lead generation type stuff. That's a concrete goal. So now you want to have some aspirations. You can do that in terms of annual revenue targets for your company. You can do that in terms of number of clients. You can do that in terms of any number of metrics. But you gotta pick one and then laser focus on that. So if you want to start off initially in number of clients, and set a target goal for yourself, a realistic goal, and then break that down into baby steps. So if you do a 12-month revenue target, You break that down into quarters, you break that down into months, you break that down into weeks. So for example, when I first started doing sales, I wanted to sell $1 million. So you do the simple math, you know, I gotta sell, I think it's 50,000 a week.
Yeah.
Right? So now that's something I can focus on. All right, I need to find an offering that's 50K, and I need to sell one of these a week.
Yeah.
And if the sales cycle for that particular offering is 3 months, then I better get started now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's something as simple as that, just defining what the goal is, and then deriving some metrics around it that are, one, attainable, realistic, measurable, quantifiable, and then collecting that data, and then holding yourself accountable, looking at the data and say, hey, am I on track? For example, if you want to bring on 100 accounts, new accounts this year for your company, you got to do the math and say, all right, 50 working weeks, I need to get 2 a week. That seems much more realistic than saying, hey, go find me 100 clients.
Yeah.
Bring on 2 a week. All right, now we can do the funnel math, right? It takes me about 50 prospects to get 20 meetings, to get 10 opportunities to convert two. So now it's like, all right, now I need to set up 10 meetings a week to get those 2. So now you have a plan. You can plan around that, right? You can plan your time around that. You can plan your efforts around that. But it starts first and foremost with defining your goals, and then determining those metrics, and then executing, developing a plan and executing to achieve those targets.
Yeah, that's really good. So you use this same kind of premise. I mean, or don't you have some kind of a designed out almost strategy kind of, I don't know, math that you kind of created on your own, like as far as for when you're encountering something? I mean, you're developing it out. We've talked about this in the past, but you have some kind of a method that you've created, really. Is that for strategy, or was that more for the sale?
For the sales enablement program?
Yeah.
So I developed a strategy for that. I mean, the goal was to penetrate new accounts, to acquire new accounts. So you start off with, if that's your goal, what are the requirements to be able to do that? So my particular customer, as sales enablement, was the sales executive. So I wasn't client facing in that role. My customer was a sales executive. So it meant the first part of that was mission planning, problem analysis. Mission planning, problem analysis was sit down with sales executives and say, what information do you need in order to successfully penetrate a new account? So for them, they were telling me, we need to know about the industry, we need to understand who the decision makers are, what the company's business objectives are, what their IT strategy is, so we can get into that.
Yeah.
So all right, I can work with that. Now I can go out there, I can evaluate sources of information, I can take all that information in, process it, fuse it together, synthesize it, and then give it back to you in a format that is easy for you to consume. And for that, for me, it was basically a 10-page. We called it a point of view.
Yeah.
That focused on high-level industry trends. So for example, banking and capital markets, what were the 3 to 5 main trends that were driving that industry, from regulatory reform to mergers and acquisitions? What are those 3 to 5 trends? What are companies in that industry doing from an IT perspective to address those trends? Then who are the decision makers, the personnel at the company by role, who are normally associated with those type of initiatives? And then once you have that, that's the lens by which you can analyze a target company. So if I want to get into Acme Bank, now I know what is Acme Bank trying to do to address this trend.
Yeah.
So I can say, hey, what are you doing to address X? Because these are what other companies in the industry are doing. And then
that's good.
Those target roles, who are the people that are filling those roles? Because at the end of the day, even if you're in B2B sales, you're still selling to people.
Yeah.
So it's important to know who the people are, background on the person, what their role is, what their business objectives are, what's the business problems they're responsible for, and what are their personal interests. Just develop all of that and give it on the SE with information, the sales executive with information, so they can build rapport, build a relationship, and try to solve a problem for them.
Yeah. So whenever you were going out and doing that on the executive, I mean, where were you getting the information on what they're interested in based on their social media stuff?
When I was deep diving on the people.
Yeah.
I can't tell you that.
Okay.
No, that's super secret spy stuff. No, just kidding. No, it's a lot of open source
Tap it into your military.
Yeah. I mean, part of it was my military background. I mean, but there's a lot of open source, readily available, public available information out there.
Yeah.
Google is you Google people by name, and you'd be surprised at the stuff that people share. You can find newspaper or printed articles. You can find podcast videos like this where they've been on, video recording sessions of them speaking at corporate functions or speaking engagements. And then you can look at their personal profiles, and you can see from their LinkedIn profile, for example, or their Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or a million other things, what they're interested in on a personal perspective, to build a little bit of rapport and see if you have anything in common with the person to initiate that first conversation.
Yeah.
Just before you start developing the business. So you don't need to be an intelligence guy to do that. I mean, everyone can go out there and kind of, you have the person's name, you have the role, you do a little bit of poking around, you see what they put out there. So a big part of sales we teach that is taught is understand the customer pain points. Well, a lot of times you can find that out from Twitter rants and Facebook rants and LinkedIn. Like, a lot of times they'll put that out there. You want to know what's bugging them? They'll tell you. They'll air their grievances sometimes, so that's a good way to do it. So what I was encouraging that what my product was doing for the sales executives was, client conversations, phone calls or meetings, that's precious time. Time is a precious resource. So if you can do some research up front and answer a lot of those initial questions through open source research, then you can save that precious time to get to the meat of what you really need to have, the discussion that matters with your customers. So you kind of accelerate that time to revenue by skipping a couple, 2 to 3 steps in conversations, because you've done that, you've found the answers to the generic questions up front in advance.
And that's such a genius thing, man. I just want to tell you. And then being able to take all that information is one thing, and then putting it into a consumable 10-page report is a whole nother.
Once
right?
again, I mean, it comes down to laser focus on what matters, right?
Yeah.
So in sales, as a sales guy, when I broke it down for myself, my objective was to identify opportunities.
Yeah.
So define what an opportunity is. An opportunity for me was a customer has a problem that we have a value-added solution for. So for me, it was laser focused on going out there and finding opportunities. So how do I do that? So for me, it was, I need 2 things. I need one, to be talking to potential clients and customers, so networking is a huge part of that. And the other thing I needed was the knowledge to recognize the opportunity when it presented itself during the conversation, because a lot of times wouldn't life be great if you could walk up to your customer and say, hey, what do you need? And they say, I'd like to order 100 of your widgets, please. That would just be grand, but that's not the way it works. Normally they'll tell you some kind of problem they're facing, and then you need to have the knowledge to recognize that as an opportunity for yourself. And you just got to focus, for me, 3 simple buckets of information that you need to recognize an opportunity. One, you need to be intimately familiar with your company that you work for, right, in terms of what are your offerings, what is your selling process, what is the staffing or procurement part, who are the experts and the resources that you can bring in to assist you. So you have to have knowledge in that. First, your own company. 2, your target company. You need to be intimately familiar with their business objectives. How do they make money? How do they purchase? What's their procurement process? Who are the decision makers? Who are their competitors? Right? And then the last thing, the 3rd bucket, is the industry that they're in. Right? That's the context by which they're trying to operate. That's some of the factors that are going to influence the way they do business. So if you understand your company and your offerings, you understand your target company, and you understand the industry in which they operate, then you'll have the information you need to identify opportunities in those conversations.
That's huge, man.
So it boils down to networking, right? At the end of the day, it's all about networking, internal and external, to fill those buckets of information and build those relationships that'll create that next opportunity. That's why I'm in so many things right now, because I network my butt off. I'm all about a lifelong learning. I'm always constantly learning, so I'm trying to find people that are better at something than me, and then when I find those people, we hang out, like you and I, right? You're an entrepreneur. I have an interest in learning about entrepreneurs and learning about business and learning about marketing. So that's why you and I hit it off. We like to hang out and talk about these things and see where I learn from you and you learn from me. How we can a mutually beneficial relationship.
Plus, I honor the heck out of you just being a vet and all the,
Thanks.
I mean, like what you guys doing for us, over there, obviously, and just in general, putting your lives on the line. So thanks for that, man. But really, that's amazing. And that process, the 3-step process, is so huge. I as you were saying that, I was writing it down, and I was like, man, that's really what we're doing in the strategy sessions in general. I mean, if you don't know who you're going after from an avatar or client profile perspective, and you don't know what you're bringing to the table from your value transformation, right, and you don't know why you're doing it in the first place, and kind of what the industry looks like, then you're not doing a business. You're throwing dust in the wind and hoping it lands where you want it to.
Yeah, we say hope is not a plan.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
You're just going to wander around and you say, I'm marketing, I'm sending this stuff out into the interwebs.
Yeah.
Maybe something will hear it and come buy something from me. That's not how it works.
Yeah, or buying a square in a high school yearbook or something. Like nobody ever. I don't know of anybody that's ever gotten business off of something like that.
Right.
You know?
I mean, it happens, but like I said, you don't want to rely on chance. So the
Yeah,
more
exactly.
focused you can be, the better your results.
Yeah.
So for my currently, what I'm focusing on is sales campaigns.
Yeah.
So I'm developing sales campaigns, and a big part of those campaigns is the digital marketing strategy. So I'm collaborating with our digital marketing team to see how we can generate results. Because it's at the end of the day, you hand a list of prospects to a sales executive, you're not really their hero, right? No one wants a list of prospects because now I got to do work, right? I gotta qualify those prospects and turn them into leads. I gotta culture and nurture those leads and turn them into qualified leads, and then maybe I can get some opportunities out of that. Through digital marketing, you can automate and take advantage of some of that nurturing, some of that prospecting, some of that pre-sales activities that's not really what a sales executive wants to do. It's a necessary evil, but they are really skilled at closing, converting opportunities and closing deals.
Yeah.
That's what they get paid on. That's what they want to do. So from a marketing perspective, where I come in is we put that structure in place, right? We put it on a template that says, all right, what is the desired customer? What's the client base? Who are we going after? What's our ideal target company? And more importantly, within that company, who are the personas that we're going to go after?
Yeah.
Do we have to go after the CIO? Do you want to go after the data center manager? Like, who is the person? And then we go back to what is the industry, the messaging, right? What do they care about?
Yeah.
What are the trends, so we can say, all right, now we know we've identified this role at these companies with this industry, so now we can say we're going to target them with this offering because it's a solution to their problem. So that drives the messaging. We're going to tailor it to a marketing qualified lead list, hopefully, will be the result of the digital marketing campaign. But it comes down to laser focus on the results. What are we trying to do here? So I'm not trying to sell anyone anything when I'm marketing. My desired effect is marketing qualified leads. I hand that off to the well-qualified and highly motivated sales executives to go ahead and generate sales off of that. But if you think you're going to sell just off your digital marketing, then you've kind of lost focus, right? Your focus is marketing qualified leads. You have a sales force to sell. So everyone understands their role, understands their parts, highly specializes in their part, and the team wins. That's
huge, man. Well, especially in the industry like what you're in, where you're turning. I mean, what's your cycle is what, 6 months or something, or is that what you said?
It depends on the offering.
Oh, okay.
So some of them are 30 days, some of them are years, months. It just depends on the size and scope of the services. We cover the full gamut of managed services from an IT perspective. So
that's huge, man. So all of this stuff is not just theory to you. You've seen it work over and over and over and over again, whether that was winning an objective in Afghanistan or if that was here in the business. But from a personal standpoint, like when you were transitioning out of the military, how did you take those basics that you mastered and then basically apply that to, because you're doing pretty well for yourself. You're not right.
Yeah. I'm not starving. My kids have shoes on their feet. So.
Yeah. So you were able to take that, and a lot of guys that are transitioning out of the military aren't really finding that an easy process. So
yeah, the military to civilian transition process, it was a lot more challenging than I expected it to be.
Yeah.
I think part of it is we do a little bit of a disservice to service members when we say that everyone's lining up to hire you. Everybody wants to hire a veteran. That's not necessarily the case. They want to hire veterans that have skills that will add value to their company for a specific role. So when I first started out, like a lot of military transitioners, where I was looking for a great opportunity. Okay, that's not going to get you anywhere. That's not focused enough.
Yeah.
You got to focus down on what exactly do you want to do. Do you want to be in IT sales? Do you want to be in training and development? Do you want to be in HR? Like, you have to focus more so you can find it.
Yeah.
Right? If you're looking for a needle in a haystack, but you don't know what the needle looks like, you're never going to find it. So that was the first. I spun my wheels and wasted about 6 months of my transition looking for great opportunities. Because I would get into these conversations and they thought I was a cool dude and they appreciated what I did during my military service, but none of that translated into adding value to their company.
Yeah.
The second part of it, what I had to realize is I had to learn the language, right? Like I jokingly said in my intro, it's like a career change where I was speaking a foreign language. No one was looking to hire a military intelligence officer.
Yeah.
They all wanted to hear cool war stories, and they liked some of the cool things I'd done, but none of that, in their mind, they couldn't translate that into action at their company.
Yeah.
So I had to do my research and set up my goal to find out, how does this apply? Research and analytics and strategic planning and sales strategy. I mean, it's all language that makes a difference. So the second piece is first figure out what you want to be when you grow up, pick a career to focus on, and then do your research and learn about that industry, that company. What are the specific roles in a company? What are the required skill sets? And then focus on learning those. Learn how to do sales.
Yeah.
Learn what sales means. Learn the different sales methodologies. Learn the different language. Like I said, I've only been doing this 2 years now, but I think I'm not doing a good job speaking language that you understand, because when I use terms like sales funnels and marketing qualified leads, you're nodding over there, so it seems like it's paying off. We can have a conversation where we're both speaking the same language. So if I continue to use military vernacular and terminology, and it just doesn't work. I mean, it adds spice sometimes to use military metaphors and some personal stories where I showed how I did the military equivalent of something. But at the end of the day, you don't want to have the other person in the conversation have to do the translation. If you can do that for them, you get much further along the way.
Well, that totally, based on what you were just talking about with having to translate what you were talking about or anything like that. I mean, so many times I'll find companies are doing that in their marketing message. A lot of times, and they'll use industry-specific terminologies or whatever else, and it's like, never do that. I mean,
Correct. Yes.
You need to try to simplify as much as possible what your message is in a way that anybody can understand, and that's really a sign of genius. It's not, I think many times we're trying to impress people by what we know, rather than just say it in English,
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, use simple words. So in the Marine Corps, when we were doing training, we'd always say, if you can't explain it to a 7-year-old, then you're not going to be successful. So that's what drives me, is simplifying it down. If I can't draw it out simply on a whiteboard and explain it to a 7-year-old, then realistically, it might get lost in translation. Right? When you communicate, you're sending out a message. That person is receiving the message and interpreting it, and you want to make sure that you simplify that as much as possible so nothing gets lost in the transition. So it's about a laser focus. What is the messaging that will resonate with that intended person? And send it to them in the terms and the language that means something to them, that resonates with them, so they will respond to it.
That's good, man. So earlier on in our conversation, you were talking about brilliance in the basics. Can you, just real quick, because we only have a few more minutes left, what are those basics?
I mean,
you probably already covered a lot of that.
Yeah. So brilliance in the basics is just the philosophy by breaking something down into its simplest form. For example, like I just said, explaining it in language that a 7-year-old can understand. Laser focused on the results.
Yeah.
What are you trying to accomplish? What are the minimum requirements to do that? And then laser focus on that. Don't get super complicated. Just look at the New England Patriots. Everyone hates to hate on them. Everyone likes to hate on them. But in the end, they're not super sexy. They don't run a super sophisticated offense. They're brilliant. They kill you 4 yards at a time.
Yeah.
Right? They hand the ball off, short passes. They just kill you because they execute perfectly. Blocking, formation running, teamwork. I mean, it's all brilliance in the basics. That's why they've been so successful, and that's what I focus on. I laser focus on almost a minimalist approach, right? What is the minimum amount I need to do to be successful? And then exceed those expectations. So just if you can't laser focus. So for example, what I tell our salespeople now, they could do some sales coaching and mentorship with some of our younger salespeople. Draw a straight line of revenue, right? If you think you have a deal, can you draw a straight line between you where you're sitting now and where you get paid at the end? Like, show me that process.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the process, then how are you going to close a deal and win that deal? You have to be able
that's
to.
good, man.
You have to focus on the results.
And that, I mean, so again, just applying that to a marketing perspective, just to get your brand out there, what do you want people to know about your brand? If you can't explain that in the long term, then you don't have anything in place, you
It's
know?
not just people, but people, right?
Yeah,
Who do you want to
yeah,
know
all of
about
that,
you?
yeah.
Right, you don't, because I mean, like I said, you gotta focus on the metrics. What are your goals here? You don't want everyone in the world to know about Lure Studios. I mean, that would be nice.
Oh,
That's an
just the one,
aspiration,
yeah.
but you wanna laser focus on, are you targeting the marketing folks? Can you augment an existing marketing? Are you going after those smaller companies that don't have a marketing group, that can outsource that to specialists?
Yep.
That can do better for them at that. So that's what I mean by focusing on the basics. It's not, you can't overly simplify it to where I want people to know about my brand.
Right.
No, what people are we specifically talking about? Because that will drive the messaging, that'll drive the channel, right? That'll drive everything.
That's good, man. So we're kind of at the end of our time, but I want, like, do you have like a cool story? You mentioned it earlier, how, I mean, you had talked about the poppy seed. I don't know what you can talk about or can't, but the story about how you utilize some of this in a military environment and how it became successful. But
Yeah.
the one about the poppy fields was pretty cool, or if you have something
Yeah,
else.
I'll share that. I mean, that's a cool story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell that one. So, when I first got to Afghanistan in December of 2011, it's the winter season. Historically in Afghanistan, the insurgents fought during the summertime. And so they would kind of go dormant in the winter because no one wants to fight when it's cold. So the big thing, the first question I got asked was, when is the fighting going to start? When is this, we refer to it as a spring offensive, when is that going to start?
Is that where the Arab Spring came from?
No, it's different.
No, okay.
So
That's y'all's
yeah.
Arab Spring. Yeah.
So at its simple questions, when's it going to start? Well, it's going to start in the spring, right?
Yeah.
Spring offensive is going to start in the spring. You could look at basic research and say historically it starts in the month of April, but that's not actionable. That's not specific enough. You can't really plan around it. So what we did was, all right, let's look at the requirements that it would take in order for them to conduct offensive operations, right? So they need command and control, they need money, they need weapons, they need fighters, right? They need logistics, they need planning, they need intelligence on us so they can plan their operations, they need leadership. All right, these are all of the required elements for them to do that. Let's laser focus on the one that's most important, money. They got to pay for all that. I mean, they might be motivated insurgents, but at the end of the day, they want to get paid. They want to get rewarded for their efforts and financially so they can support their families. And so we said, all right, where's the money come from? Well, in Helmand Province, southwest Afghanistan, it came through the drug trade, which was opium, which was derived from poppy plants. So like, all right, now it's time to focus on the poppy. We got to learn, how do you cultivate poppy? What is the growing cycle of it? What is the plant like through its various growth stages? What does a farm look like in terms of planting program patterns? Are they horizontal? There's a lot of irrigation. What does it look like? So we laser focused on the poppy plant, and we realized, like first it grew, then it flowered, then the leaves fell off, and then there was the bulbs left. They stored the bulbs to get the opium, the stuff from the plant, the sap from the plant to make the drugs from. So we laser focused on that and realized, once the workforce that's very labor intensive, so the same military age males that were doing the flooding were the ones that were also doing the farming. So we realized that we predicted that once the harvest was over and they had preserved and protected their income, then they would take 2 or 3 days to transition over into the fighting. So we watched and monitored the status of the poppy plants and predicted within a few days where we're going to start, province by province, within our AO.
Wow.
Great success. But once again, focusing on the results, right? How does this work? Breaking it down to its parts, looking at something that's quantifiable, easily definable, easy to monitor, and just gathering that data, watching it, and then predicting off of that data set.
Yeah, and really, I think, the one thing we didn't really talk about here, but I've heard just basically consistently throughout your whole deal is asking the right questions.
Yes, it's customer driven, right?
Yeah.
You gotta know what matters. So you're not expected to be an expert in everything. I mean, one of the things I used to teach my students when I was teaching Intel was the secret to being a successful Intel officer is not knowing everything. It's knowing where to go find the answers.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing in marketing. That's the same thing. There's subject matter
Say
experts
that again,
out
because
there.
I think a lot of people out there need to hear that twice.
Yeah, the secret to success is not being the smartest guy, to knowing everything. It's knowing how to quickly go and find that answer.
Yeah.
So if you know who the subject matter experts are, you have these partnerships and you have these relationships with people, then you recognize when you're having a conversation. If I'm having a conversation about digital marketing and how to use social media to automate some lead generation, I'm going to call my buddies Cory and Mike at Laura Studios, right? I'm not going to try and reinvent a wheel. Someone already has that wheel. I'm going to go and try to use your wheel and adapt it to my needs. So that's the secret, is you want to have a general understanding, but you really want to understand and catalog what are those resources and information that you can rely on quickly to get those information requirements.
That's so huge, man. Well, dude, thank you for taking the time to be here today, really. This was awesome. I learned a lot personally, and I do this every day.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks, Cory.
Yeah, man. So where can everybody get a hold of you at? And, if you want to, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm available on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to find me.
This guy is a master LinkedIn guy, though, too, by the way. So any of these, like the social media platforms and a lot of that stuff, you pretty much mastered how to use those to get what you need done, which I really honor. I think that's cool. So.
Yeah, like I said, lifelong student, so I learned how to network effectively through social media. You can extend your reach. It's all about personal branding. So once again, I read lots and lots of advice articles. You see those things all the time. It's like the top 10 ways to do X, top 10 ways to cold call, the top 10 ways to LinkedIn tips. Like, I read those and I just do them. So, and I do the simple things that people say. They have a professional photo, have an interesting value added tagline.
Yeah.
Introduce you, do a little bit of research up front, and personalize an email, and it works because it's bringing some of the basics. Just do the simple things. You don't have to overthink it. Just do it and then commit to it. Have a plan, right? I had a plan of what I wanted to be, what my professional brand wanted to be. I wanted to be known for IT sales, right? I'm interested in IT. I'm interested in B2B sales, and I'm interested in veterans, helping veterans with their military to civilian transition. So that's what I focus all my time and attention to on online, is reading, participating in conversations, and sharing content related to that. Connecting with people involved in those circles, and then it just snowballs. Like every connection, there's an order of magnitude to that, and then before you know it, you say enough stuff, you be genuine, you just be yourself, and eventually people like what you have to say, and recognize you as a thought leader, and you just keep rolling with that, and you figure out. I try to leverage my network to help others. So I kind of view myself as a connector. So when I meet someone and they tell me what they do, I try to immediately introduce them to people I know that are associated with that, or I think can add benefit from it. And there's deposit into the karma bank, and then sooner rather than later, sometimes that stuff comes back to me with great opportunities.
That's awesome, man. So read off again. I can't remember if I interrupted you when you were trying to say that, but that was good stuff. Yeah,
no, I said LinkedIn is the best way to find me. I share. It's very detailed. I share lots of content on there, lots of articles, and you email me or send me a connection request, and I'll always respond.
So that's Ted Corbeel, Corbell, B-I-E-L-L.
Corbeill.
Yeah, there you go. And that's where he's at. And if you're looking to get a strategy done for your business or whatever, we offer that at Lure Studios. First, we'd want to sit down and have just a talk with you one-on-one. So give us a call, reach out to us on lurestudios.com, and we can just go through and see what your needs are. And then from there, we do have a strategy package that we offer where we can dive into that and really get you started on the right foot with services to follow that as well. So, Ted, thanks again, man. Really glad to have you.
Anytime.
Thanks, brother. Y'all have a blessed day, and we'll talk to you next time. awesome.
That was fun, man. Let's try to get a picture.
Huh?
Let's try to get a picture of us.
Good.
Get an intern back in here and take a picture of us. Go pose for a picture.
Oh, let me turn that off.